Hi, my name is Natalia Frumkin, and I graduated from Team 971 in 2016. I recently graduated from Boston University, where I majored in computer engineering, and I will be attending UT Austin for pursuing a PhD in hardware-aware machine learning. Something that I learned from Team 971 was how to learn things that you've really never had any experience with before. And by that I mean not just learning in a classroom where, you build off of the knowledge that you've sort of seen in the past and you get new topics, but they're all kind of in the same field. I mean like the kind of thing like lathe training or learning about sheet metal or pneumatics where you're kind of experiencing something that's completely new that you don't have experience with and you have to learn how to use it and in some cases become an expert in it. So that's something I think is very special and unique about 971, as well as robotics as a whole. And I think something that really stuck with me through college, in the sense of I was never really afraid to try a new class or take something that was very different just because it was different. And I think that really comes back to 971 and the fact that we had to learn things that were completely new. So I really appreciated that. And a cool project I worked on. I have to say, one of my favorite things that I worked on was basically where we compress GIFs. So the idea is that we take an image, a GIF image, then we run it through a machine learning algorithm, like everyone else, I guess, in this world. We use a long short-term memory, LSTM, and not an LSTM. We used variational autoencoder, and we ran it through that and got a compressed view of our data sample, and we were able to basically store that in a more compressed format. So that was the project that I really enjoyed working on. All right, thank you.
So, hi everyone. Welcome to the next Spartan Series talk, Best Practices of Being a Year-Round Team. I'm Alex, the other presenter is Mira, and we're going to be going through this presentation today to help you guys get some more info about how to do this.
So our goals for today are, like, very broadly to help you understand how our goals and our process of being a year-round team help us be more successful during the season. So more specifically, we want to help you guys understand how you can increase your team success by utilizing different things you can do during the off season. And to do that, we're going to take you through what 971 does during the off season, our process, our goals, and our organization. And based on that, we hope that'll help you identify your team's goals and values and figure out your structure based on that. So a little bit about us. I'm Mira, as Alex said. I'm a co-president of 971, and I'm going to be a senior in the fall. On our team, I'm involved in manufacturing, assembly, strategy, entrepreneurship or outreach, and recruiting and training new members. And a fun fact about me is that I mentored a robotics team in South Africa last summer, and they earned a bronze medal in the first competition they ever entered.
So I'm Alex. I'm also a co-president, and I'm going to be a senior this year. So on the robotics team, I'm mainly involved in manufacturing, strategy, scouting, competition, and assembly. And a fun fact about me is I'm currently working as a NASA Ames intern at the IRG Intelligent Robotics Lab. So analyzing your goals and process. So before we really get into our own process, we want everyone to think about your own team's process. So we want you guys to look at your team and what your own unique goals are and your methods of achieving those goals. You want to look at team focus. So use SWOT analysis, which is strength, weakness, opportunity, and threats, and use this on your own team and create goals and turn those goals into actionable processes. You want to decide what's right for your team, what works for you, what doesn't. Not all our advice or information that we give in this will work for every team. You should choose things that work for you and incorporate them, as well as think about what you want to achieve. What do you want to achieve through your off-season processes? in order to make yourself a better team.
So with that in mind, we're going to take you through how 971 looks at a typical off season, which we've broken down here into fall and summer. So during the summer, like typically what we tend to focus on is outreach, leadership training, and starting our third robot. So our values during the summer are to, like, first off, to retain students. So we want students who've been on the team in the past to keep coming the next year. And so we do that by giving them opportunities to grow their skills during the summer. Another value we have during the summer is developing leaders. So we start our new leadership transition in the summer, and we'll talk about that in a lot more detail later. And then our goal for our outreach is to help raise the playing field. So to help other teams like learn from what we do and help them however we can to help like grow the game of first. And then I guess like considerations that we have to take in the summer is it like both students and mentors are traveling and have other programs that they're involved in. So they typically won't be able to commit as much time to robotics as they would during the season or other parts of the year. And then of course this year because of COVID-19, we're like trying to do a lot of these things virtually. So that's definitely something that's impacted how we run this off season. In the fall, our focus shifts to recruiting new members and training them. And that is also through off-season competitions. So we think it's really important for people to learn from hands-on experience and to have fun learning and to engage returning members to grow their skills. And so we do that through the third robot, which exposes like students of all levels to new technical skills and helps them develop specializations. And then we like teach our new students how to approach like going through a competition through off-season competitions. And then of course in the fall we also have like people going back to school, so there's like stress with that and people might be committed to other extracurriculars, so we also have to keep that in
mind. Actually, question that relates to that: how do you avoid mentor and student burnout with a year-long cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like we definitely have much more meeting time, like in terms of hours per week during the season. And then we tend to take a little bit of a break after the season because like everybody's pretty tired and like somewhat overwhelmed with robotics. And as we go back in the summer and the fall, it's much less of a time commitment. So during the season, we meet 5 days a week. During the summer and fall, we meet, depending on how much people are willing to show up, between 1 and 3 days a week. So, and the off season is like much more about learning and having fun and much less stressful, which I think also helps keep people from burning out. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Alex.
I'm good. So for meetings, so we have year-round weekly Wednesday meetings. So no matter off-season or on-season, we'll always have these pretty much staple 2.5-hour meetings. Generally during the on-season, we'll have longer weekend meetings. So Friday through Sunday we'll be meeting, as well as open leadership meetings where we have a lot of leadership we have a leadership meeting where anyone's welcome to join and have put in their own input. And so our meeting schedule, as Mira said in the last slide, will change depending on whether it's on-season or off-season due to a variety of factors, mainly time commitment, how engaged students are, leadership. So for example, in like leadership transition periods, as well as attendance requirements. We generally don't have too many strict guidelines for attendance. It's more what you put into robotics, you'll get out. And so the more you're able to commit time into it, the more you'll learn and the more you'll grow.
So then, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things we tend to focus on during the summer is outreach. And a lot of what we tend to do in a normal year is go to demos over the summer, which is like both from our sponsors to local tech showcases. Unfortunately, that's not really something we're able to do this year, but we do still have Spartan series, which this is part of. And another aspect of our outreach is helping other teams, which typically will reach out to us year round. But the like overarching goal of most of our outreach is to share our team and our knowledge with both our local community, so like as many people know about our team as possible, and to help other people in the FRC community. So when you're thinking about outreach for your team, like the most important thing to consider is like, what does your team value? What like strengths does your team have that they can share with other FRC teams and with the community? And then the next thing is how many resources do you have to commit to outreach? Like what you're able to achieve like during a given period of time is going to depend on how many students, how many mentors, how much time and money you have committed to outreach. And then the third thing is like looking at your community. Like maybe if your community has lots and lots of like FRC teams already, like going out and starting another team is like probably not the best thing to consider. But so that really depends on like what your situation is like.
And also just one more thing, often for outreach, a lot of events are also work both for just showing off, like helping the community, but also for recruiting and kind of gaining interest even in younger kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for specifically recruiting new students, generally a big thing is awareness, and awareness converts into interest. So we'll contact middle schools and we'll have lots of demos, not only for those middle schools, but also just in locally. And so you'll have often a lot of younger kids will attend and see the robots that we're making and be interested and then be tempted to join the team in high school. We also specifically in our high school, we have something called Club Arena, where all the clubs basically have 2 days to show off what they do. And we'll often host demos then for high schoolers, and we'll actually recruit not just freshmen, but also some like sophomores and juniors that just hadn't heard about the team. And so it's a good way to spread awareness that way, as well as back to school night for incoming freshmen. And we also host an open house, although this year we had to host a virtual open house. January, we'll open up the lab. We'll have some of our older robots on display, and we'll talk to parents and younger students about what we do and what students can get out of robotics. For specifically your own recruiting efforts, you often want to consider whether you want to invest time into demos for schools or just community, like community-based demos or spreading awareness. There's many different sources for recruiting new members, and you should take these into account when deciding what you want to do in order to increase awareness. Often then a way to do this is through feeder programs. For example, a lot of the students that are joining us will be coming from FLL or be doing some sort of Lego League or VEX earlier on, and we can and they'll join our FRC team once they get into high school, as well as building a team image that's not only welcoming for new students, but also as an environment where people aren't afraid to learn and have fun.
And I think to add one more thing to that, another thing that is like really important when we talk to new like potential students about our team is that we really emphasize that you don't need to have any skills or experience to join first. I think that's like robotics can sometimes seem like this big scary thing where people build really complicated robots, and it absolutely is, but so many of our students like came into our team with like no experience machining or doing CAD or any of that, and like all of them have been able to achieve so many things.
Definitely.
Okay, so once we have new students in the fall, we tend to shift our focus to training. And training does happen throughout the off season because training is both for like increasing the skills of current members and for new members. But the focus tends to be in the fall because normally we have like less people around in the summer, and so people tend to come back and be ready to learn again in the fall. Almost all of our training is student-led, and it's mostly through two different channels. The first is through structured workshops. So that's things like safety and machine shop tools, our machines like our router, mill, lathe, and 3D printer, basic CAD and design, electrical drawings. Scouting will be some through workshops and a lot more through experience and competitions, but the introduction will be through a workshop. And then through our third robot project, which we're going to talk about more and explain in more detail, students have an opportunity to have like hands-on experience working on prototypes, working on design. After they've been like officially trained on a machine, they're able to apply those skills to practice under less pressure, making parts for the third robot than the time constraints they would have during the season. And the focus of third robot is really like applying all of these skills that they've learned in a more structured setting to how they would apply to our robot.
Yeah, and also one thing to add on for training is while it gives your newer members as well as more experienced members a good foundational base for just so they understand what's going on, it's also a really good way to showcase the different aspects, the full breadth of what we do in the robotics team. So newer members can kind of see everything that we do and find interest in one or two specific areas that they can then pursue further and more in depth.
So I got something else that people are probably wondering right now is that a lot of this training sounds really hands-on. Like, how have we been approaching that? Because we're meeting all online. And so we have been, since we've been virtual, since the pandemic, we've had a lot of current members working on CAD projects to increase their skills. And we've done some workshops as like presentations on different things. Alex did one on what is scouting. We did sort of an overview of the season. So we've been able to introduce new members to some concepts through virtual workshops, but it's definitely hard without like hands-on experience of assembling and things like that.
So another really important aspect of the off season is leadership development. This is the time when people are graduating and you're transitioning into new leadership roles. And so we use the off season as a period of development and training for our new leadership slate for the next year. So generally, students will apply for a leadership position. They'll be interviewed, and a panel will decide who is chosen. And then once people are chosen, a big part of the summer is transitioning those members into their new role. So looking at role fit, how well does a student understand their role and work with the people that have to do with that role. Often they'll receive coaching from both mentors as well as the prior leadership student that was in their position who is likely graduating that. And so we'll work over the summer with that student, as well as once they have kind of this training and development, they'll be able to have hands-on experience through our third robot project and have a taste of what a regular season would look like. And so they gain hands-on experience before actually going into the on-season. The leadership process for every team is different. It's really about what you as a team value. And so the main things that you want to set up when thinking about this, your leadership slate would be your selection process. So how are you going to decide which student goes into what leadership position? Leadership structure. This is really important and pretty unique for different teams. How you want to structure where your leadership is versus say just having a core like experience group, as well as specific roles for both students and mentors which can benefit the team in the best way, as well as succession planning. So even while you have experienced leaders, working with them to plan for the next generation and for continuing their leaderships, their leadership responsibilities and using their experience to help develop new leaders.
Add a couple. Oh yeah, go ahead.
There's a question that said, what's the best part of 971's leadership structure and how does that lend to being a year-round team?
I think the part of our leadership structure that lends to being a year-round team is the fact that we start to transition into new leadership during the summer. So that way they have like most of the summer and all of the fall to like really gain experience and have coaching in their new position. I think what we're learning right now is that maybe something that we have to do with our leadership structure is it might have to vary from year to year depending on what students we have, what that particular year looks like. And so I think that could end up being something that really becomes a strength because we're not set into like such a rigid structure. We can be fluid depending on what students we have in a certain year, what like strengths they have and how we can best use those.
And then one other question. Do you guys have an attendance system for each meeting? This person says that for them, their off-season meetings are drop-in, so training is difficult since everyone's at different stages.
Yeah, so we do have an attendance, a loose attendance registration during the on-season, so we can kind of see who is attending meetings and committed to the team. But during the off-season, we try to, especially for training, we try to have thorough signups and advertise to everyone on our e-list, as well as choose anyone who's interested in the team, already in the team. And so we'll plan these workshops often several weeks, if not a month or two ahead, and make sure everyone knows about it before the workshop happens. So, and then have them sign up so we know how many people are willing to join and interested in the workshop, as well as make sure that everyone on the team knows of the opportunity and can use it to their best advantage.
Okay, and then adding one more thing onto the slide. I think when it comes to your team, well, I guess I just talked about this, but structure is something that can change. Like both it has to fit your team and it has to fit the student leadership that you have in a particular year. And then another thing about succession planning is that that's also, it's not just like having the prior leaders around to coach the people who are going to be in that position next, but like having them keep documentation that's accessible to new people, and like especially training documentation so that it can be used year over year and new leaders are not having to create those new materials from scratch every year. So we use like a team shared Google Drive, and we keep like all of those things there so they're accessible to anyone on the team. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is our third robot project, which is, if you're wondering why it's called third robot, it's because we build 2 robots during the competition season, a competition robot and a practice robot. So our off-season robot is the third robot. We started the third robot project like, I think about 5 years ago. And the goal is really to give students a chance to like practice their skills and join the team where they can have an opportunity to have an engaging hands-on learning experience without the pressure of the competition season and the stress of that. And so it allows our new student leaders to have experience in their positions because they'll have the same positions for third robot as they will during the following season. It allows students of all levels to build technical skills, from designing to manufacturing to assembling to working on code. And our third robot is a completely student-run project, which also helps our new leadership learn like accountability and responsibility and how they manage a group of people, how they get things done, what happens if we're falling behind. And those are all really important lessons for us to take with us into the season.
Quickly, there's a question, you might cover this, but it says, what things do you do to make sure that every member has a job or is doing something important? And what type of requirements does your team have?
So for our, especially in terms of requirements for being in certain areas, our team's very open in terms of both just any area that a student wants to participate in and learn about, they're free to. We don't have any prerequisites for example, to join like the CAD team. Our emphasis is more about student learning and student education. So we don't have prerequisites for any of those areas. As for making sure that everyone has something to do, this is definitely something that we have looked at the past, because often more experienced members, of course, will be able to contribute more. But we have tried to solve this by doing things such as pairing students together. So we'll pair less experienced members with a more experienced student so they can kind of shadow them and follow along and see the technical process for themselves, as well as start learning those technical skills. And just our robotics team has so many different areas that people can work in. Everyone can find their own niche. And so we encourage people to look at all the options and look at all the areas of learning they can, and work with the people who are knowledgeable in those areas, who are open to newer members coming in and helping train them.
Something else that we've started doing in the past like year or two is that at the beginning of every meeting, we'll put a list of everything that people are working on up on a whiteboard. So if a new student comes in and they're not really sure what they want to do, they can look at that and pick something they're interested in, go up to a more experienced student and ask how they can help out with that. And even if they don't have any skill or experience in that area already, they can learn by shadowing the other student and asking them questions.
So for the next slide, we have scouting and strategy during off-season competitions. So this is for during off-season competitions. Luckily, the competition is very similar, and it's a super good way to not only train your scouts and strategy team for the upcoming season, but also to just garner interest in the competitive scene of robotics. A lot of new students will find they're very passionate about competition and really enjoy competitions because of all the people you meet and kind of the atmosphere. And so we try to go to 2 or 3 off-season competitions every off-season. And so for scouting, we'll have 6+ data scouts as well as note scouts that we're training that are getting trained also by our more experienced scouts. And it's also a big thing for team mindset. We want to instill the importance of competition and how it can, and also for scouting specifically, how each scout makes a difference and has a large impact. For strategy, one of the things that we've been trying is shadowing. So we'll often have new members who are interested in kind of the match strategy and cycling, stuff like that, shadow the strategy team and shadow more experienced strategy members. And so they get the chance to participate in, for example, alliance strategy discussions, as well as give their own input and kind of learn more about that area. We've also, during this off-season with COVID-19, we've been looking at a lot of research and development in the strategy area. So we're looking at updating our scouting app to see if there's changes that we can make that will make it more efficient, as well as certain strategy processes and how our strategy team works that other teams that are new to us and that we haven't tried before, and seeing how they work during this off season. Specifically for this year, due to the game being replayed, we have already match video and we know the general idea of how the game will play out. And so we can review old 2020 matches and kind of refine our own strategy and our own plans in regards to alliances and alliance strategy, as well as we're planning to do a mock kickoff for newer members to kind of learn more about the game, as well as since there won't be as big a kickoff this year due to the game being very similar, it gives them that experience that they might be missing during the on-season.
So of course, the other aspect of competition that off-season competition allows us to train new students for is for drive team and for pit crew. So for drive team, we will typically have open practice throughout the summer, 2 or 3 days where anyone can show up and try out driving the robot. And if there are open positions, if students from the previous year have not graduated, we'll typically hold tryouts at the end of that. And our drive team selection is based on a combination of hard and soft skills. So both hard skills would be cycling time, things like that, but soft skills would also be can you work with other people well? Can you take feedback? Can you stay calm under pressure? And so off-season competitions are really a chance for us to evaluate how well people can do on drive team. And especially we'll go to a competition in Madeira in the fall where we bring 3 robots. So we have the opportunity for 3 times as many people to try out being on drive team. And typically, because we don't have time to hold tryouts during the build season drive team selection will be based on performance in off season. And then for pit crew, we've started selecting students to manage specific subsystems. So every student in pit knows what their role is, and knows before a match that it's their responsibility to make sure, like, for example, everything about the drivetrain is checked. Pit crew selection is based on both like commitment and technical skill during the off season, and like what has been shown from that student in the past. And allowing students to work in pit and off season competitions prepares them for working in the season, because even if it's a more relaxed environment, it's still, pit is still a place that's very intense, and like that environment, not all students can work well in that environment. So allowing them to people to have experience in off-season competitions helps us see who will be best for that during the season.
So for this year specifically, things are a little weird, of course, with COVID-19 and the pandemic. And so we've been having a purely virtual off-season. So we've had to figure out new ways to not only engage the current students, but also recruit and onboard and train new members so that they're up to date once we go back into the season. So for engaging current students, we've been doing a couple projects and initiatives that we can do virtually in order to keep students engaged. So for example, we've had CAD projects where one of our top CAD mentors is not only teaches CAD, holds CAD workshops, but also helps with their own student CAD projects and kind of reviews them and helps them with developing them. We've also have a scouting and strategy development initiative where we're looking at our own strategy and scouting processes and seeing how we can improve them and where we can make them better, as well as just general team bonding and keeping everyone engaged with the team. We've been hosting virtual meetings, virtual Wednesday meetings, and we've been trying to make sure that everyone can at least see each other and talk to each other once a week. As for onboarding new members, we've been recruiting a lot of members over the summer. And so we hosted an online open house where we had presenters talk about their roles on the team, as well as different things that you can do on the team and areas of interest and learning. We also have held basic workshops in areas that we could do during virtually. For example, we're not going to be able to do any tool training or machine training, but we can teach stuff like CAD and scouting. And so we've also held new member workshops for these areas. So our virtual off-season schedule is a little bit different from our normal off-season, but we have weekly Wednesday meetings virtually using Google Meet, and students will work on projects throughout the week communicating on Slack. And we also have bi-weekly leadership team meetings where we talk about the current state of the team and what we can do better and what we can look to like specific projects we can do during the off-season.
A question about the drive team and pit crew from the slide before. Does the drive team need to be a member of the pit crew, or is their only role at the competition to drive?
No, the drive team does not need to be a member of pit crew, but it is important to us that people who are chosen for drive team that's not their only role on the team. People are chosen for drive team based on like both their skill as a driver, but also how much they've contributed to building the robot and other parts of the team. But no, they are not always also a member of pit crew. Sometimes they are because they have the skills for that as well, but that's not a requirement. So that's all we have. So if anyone has any more questions, we would love to answer them. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you learned something.
Here's a question that came in pretty early. How do you maintain good student-mentor relations?
Do you want to answer or do you want me
to? You can talk first. Yeah.
Okay. So I think one of the things how we started to improve our student-mentor relationships is by clearly defining what the roles of different students and different mentors are. And I think that's something that's not having this has caused conflict and stress in the past. And so I think like really clearly defining who's responsible for what and who has authority over what is something that's been helping us improve student-mentor relations.
A big thing that we also want to make sure is that everyone's heard. We want everyone to be able to communicate with each other without the fear of it going back on them or stress. And so we want to make sure that everyone is heard and problems are dealt with quickly and easily, as painless as possible.
Okay, another question is, what's the biggest changes to team structure you've seen while being a member? And what were the positive and negative effects that it's had?
We actually did a lot of leadership restructuring this summer. And so, I mean, I guess we have yet to see the effects of it because we haven't been through a season with it yet. But I think, like I mentioned earlier, we made our leadership team much smaller. Because previously we had a lot of really small positions, and so it ended up that almost half a team was part of leadership, which like didn't really make a lot of sense. And so now we have like our main like bigger leadership positions, and then we have a council of students who are responsible for picking up any smaller tasks. And yeah, as I said, we haven't seen how that will play out yet, but we hope that it'll be an improvement from how our structure was before.
Another question is, if you could change one thing about 971's leadership structure, what would it be?
Well, since we're transitioning into a new leadership structure, we did look at a lot of things to change, and we did change them. And so hopefully for the next year, it'll work better and we'll have more success.
Another question is, you mentioned team bonding in one of your slides. How is that working during COVID-19, social distancing, etc.?
Yeah, we did it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, cool. So we've done a couple virtual games alongside virtual meetings, which can sometimes be a little awkward with everyone if people don't talk, but we've tried to do online games and in order to bring members closer together and so that they can have shared experience, which is really important for good team synergy.
Do you have a large separation between the technical and business side in terms of student participation?
Not at all. I think almost all of our students who are involved in like business and outreach are also involved in something technical. And so that's like actually something we struggle with during the season, is that we have very few students who are involved in that because they're all working on technical stuff during the season. But like there's virtually no separation. I think almost everyone who does like business or outreach also has a technical role.
How do new members transition to eventually become team leaders? What skills are sought after in 971 leaders?
So there isn't really a super concrete structure for transitioning from a new member into becoming, say, a team leader. But generally, it's about how much engagement you put in and how much work you put in. And because that way, the more meetings you go to, the more people you interact with, you'll learn a lot more and you'll gain necessary technical skills as well as soft skills in order to be able to go be an expert in your field and be a lot more in depth and then become an experienced member. And from there, you can, if you have those skills and if you've shown that you're competent and you're responsible, that's when you can consider trying to move up to become applying for a leadership position.
What were some of the issues with leadership with your previous leadership structure?
So, okay, the part of our leadership structure that's mostly stayed the same is like the most senior leaders. So like captain, software lead, and then presidents. Those have like virtually not changed at all from our like old system to our new system. But what's changed is like in the old system, we had a lot of smaller roles. So we had like, for example, like a person responsible for like scheduling people on machines, a person responsible for like purchasing and like kitting parts, and like a lot of smaller tasks like that need to happen at a particular point in the season. And then if that person who's responsible for them didn't follow through when they needed to happen, that caused a lot of stress to other people. And so what we've transitioned to now is all of those smaller roles are essentially now managed by a group of people who are called Leadership Council. And those are people who've committed to staying involved in the team and being willing to pick up various tasks at different times during the season. So we can essentially assign someone to a task as it needs to be done.
How are you able to get participants during COVID-19, assuming it's optional? How do you get a large group of team to participate?
So during COVID-19, there's still a lot of ways to contact both members as well as interested new members virtually. And so we've been doing stuff like, for example, we have an email list that we'll send. And so anyone who's interested in joining the team can join the e-list, and we'll send out emails to them as well. We also have a team Slack where people communicate. And even though all our virtual meetings are optional, all our meetings are optional. So it's really, we aren't trying to force or restrict people into going to meetings, but it's just if they're interested and it's coming out of their own agency to attend our meetings. And if they're interested in robotics and want to learn more and want to be a larger part of the team, they will voluntarily join the meetings. And so that's our hope, that the people who are joining the meetings are actually interested in robotics and want to help and participate in the team and develop themselves.
How and why has your team changed its team culture in the past?
I'm not really sure how to answer that.
So,
I think the culture is like mostly stayed the same as long as I've been on the team, at least. And I can't really speak to how it was before.
Yeah, I would agree. The only thing is we did kind of consolidate and actually talk about specifically what we wanted our culture to be, but it's generally stayed the same for most of the time on the team as well.
Okay, last question we have at the moment. What are the expectations of your highest level leaders? Like I think you mentioned like the captain and the president and such.
So the high level leaders are not only expected to be competent in their roles and be able to fulfill so we have descriptions of what each leadership position should be able to do. And so we expect anybody in those positions to be highly competent and to be able to effectively deal with and administrate all their responsibilities and duties. But even more than that, because we have lots of experienced members who are capable, it's also a lot about soft skills. So will you take responsibility for your actions? Are you accountable? Will you get things done on time and in a sufficiently developed manner? And so there's a lot of things beyond just having the hard technical skills that we look for in high-level leadership and want in that position.
Related to that, how do you make sure people fulfill their leadership responsibilities?
We've been talking a lot about that recently. Sort of in our like previous leadership system, if someone didn't fill a responsibility, it like typically someone else who was there at the time like picked it up, and which is not a great system because it causes people to do like usually unnecessary work and like causes more stress. And so that's something we're working on. I think if we don't have people fulfilling their leadership responsibilities, we'll have a mentor have a conversation with them. I think if we like continue to have issues with accountability, I think it is a possibility that we could replace a person. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, ultimately, if someone's really not performing their duty up to what is expected and consistently not doing this, yeah, we will ultimately end up replacing them in the leadership position. But first, we want to make sure to talk to them, get their side, and try to help them develop and grow as a leader before we do anything such as change their leadership position.
Lots of questions about leadership. So how are leaders chosen? Is it some type of vote? What goes into account when picking the next president, etc.?
So we have a group of mentors who works on leadership selection every year. So they will like send out the role descriptions along with an application. And the application is like a few questions like what position do you want? Like what do you think makes you qualified for it? Why do you want to lead in this area? Like what do you hope to accomplish? And then they'll review those and then they'll interview everyone who's applied for a position. And so it's not a vote, it's a group of mentors who decides based on applications and interviews.
So both of you are leaders yourself, so I think this question is very relevant. How do the leaders balance school and robotics?
Well, I can talk first. I'm sure Mira has her own opinions, but for me personally, I generally try to just stay on top of my schoolwork and balancing it can be hard, especially during the on season. But generally, I try to make sure that my schoolwork is sufficient and I've done it well enough, and but at the same time also take on robotics responsibilities and attend meetings. It is definitely a hard balance. I think a lot of people do have trouble balancing both school and robotics, especially considering the time commitment. You can see people going upwards of 20 hours a week easily during the on season. And for me personally, I've never had too much of an issue, but I think it's a lot about just time management and making sure you're using all your time outside of school efficiently or even inside school so that you can do robotics as well as school stuff.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think time management is really, really important. Like in addition to robotics, I'm also a leader in my Girl Scout troop and I also played school sports for 2 years. So like it definitely can be a lot to manage. I think like during the season, the majority of robotics meetings or the majority of time for robotics is like Friday evenings and the weekend. So it really helps if I like stay on top of my schoolwork during the week. And then during the weekend, I can just focus on robotics and not have to worry about that. But yeah, it's definitely about time management. It's like when you have time, like you come home and like get your homework done and then you don't have to worry about it as much for robotics. But it definitely is hard to manage sometimes.
Here's a question. Does the business side stay strong during the on season? Essentially, if people are doing on the business side who are also doing technical stuff, how do they stay focused?
That's something we've been working on improving because it's not particularly great right now because like most of our people who do business also are involved in technical, and so that's their main focus during the season. Part of how we deal with that is we just tend to do like the significant part of our outreach during the fall and spring when they're not focused on that. But like we do have weekly leadership team meetings that are focused on business, like completely separate from anything robot. And so that helps us like keep track of all the business tasks we need to do during this build season.
Another question. It sounds like the leaders are your best doers. Is there training to help them lead others, or does that fall within the soft skills that you mentioned?
While sometimes people can have already developed soft skills, often we have we've been working on having mentors as well as alumni work with those students, and we'll have like leadership panels and leadership training, but not only for experienced leaders, but also for just the general member population. And so we're trying to have basically not to teach these soft skills and help them develop during the season as well.
Okay, no more questions at the moment. If there's anything else you wanted to talk about, or if anyone has any more questions, feel free to go to Slido and use event code Spartan series.
I don't have anything else to add, but thank you so much for listening. We hope we were able to help you guys learn something about how you can utilize your off season.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming.